I have 2 minutes to 7.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to the Thursday, August 12th, 2021 meeting of the Bellingham Planning Board. Jim, I'd like to go a little bit of order on the agenda so we can address a couple of things. First one's actually it's in order. 455 Hartford Avenue, they've requested continuance, correct?
That's correct. Actually, a continuation till September 23rd due to the fact that the applicant is out of the country until September.
And in regards to that, what does it do to the dates?
The decision deadline did need to get extended, and we've already received authorization or agreement from the applicant to extend that deadline well beyond September 23rd.
So we need a motion on the request for continuation on 455 Hartford Avenue. Just to let you know, he's out of the country at this point in time. So we have a motion made by Brian. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Liz on the continuance. Do we have any questions? Jim, any other comments?
Nope, not this time.
All in favor of the continue to the September 23rd meeting, which will be our second meeting in September. Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. In addition, Red Mill and the Charles. Jim, can you bring us up to date on that as of last night?
Yeah, absolutely. So Red Mill and Charles, as you know, they're working through a few items with the Conservation Commission. And as of last night, it appears that most everything has been resolved. Frank from BSC has been working diligently with the commission and the applicant to satisfy everything. So the few minor things that Frank's looking at this week. And I've spoke with the applicant, and they are expecting to have all the changes reflected on the plan set and to you well in advance of the September 9th meeting, which is the first meeting in September. And as you may recall, the planning board had exhausted their review a few weeks back and had begun to draft that decision. So if the board is amenable, I will finalize that draft decision for your consideration at the next meeting.
You need a motion for that?
Just a motion to
I know it on
continue.
the continuance, but not in the draft.
You're welcome to, if you like.
Yeah, I would like a motion to have Jim draft a favorable decision on Red Mill. But before I ask for a motion on that, Frank, is there anything you want to add?
No, just the one item is there is a waiver request for the 3-to-1 slopes that the board has to do. I presume that's going to be in Jim's decision. And I presume you'll act on that on the September 9th. And as Jim said, the commission had a couple items that I'm going to be taking a look at. I will probably not write a formal letter, I'll write an email back to everybody because it's that simple. And there'll be some items in the letter, and I think that Jim will include in any draft decision he puts before the planning board. So other than that, I think we're in good shape.
Okay. So I'm gonna need two motions. One to have Jim draft a favorable decision. And the second would be on the continuance.
Just one question, Jim. So are they abandoning the phasing change?
Yes, they're choosing not to move forward with that amended phase, and they're gonna revert back to the original one that the board has reviewed and look favorably upon.
Okay. So I'll move to draft a favorable decision.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor has been seconded to draft a favorable decision on Red Mountain and Charles. Any additional questions before I
Yes.
call for the vote?
Do we need to prove that 2-1? Slope? That's the only one we haven't done, right?
Right, so the board had looked at the slope, and the discussion was a condition in there for construction monitoring. So that will be incorporated in any decision that you guys see, and then we can tweak those conditions if you prefer. So typically with the waivers, they'll be put forward to the board. You guys can have the discussion, and they'll be incorporated in any decision, and you can tweak those and come decision time.
And that'll also be within the construction management program.
That's
correct?
correct. Yep.
So we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We need a second motion on the continuance.
I'll move to continue the public hearing until September 9th.
Do I have a second on that? Motion's been made and second to continue Red Mill and the Charles to September 9th meeting. Any additional discussion or questions? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the last continuation is asphalt engineering. Jim, they've requested,
Yes, again, Asphalt Engineering has requested continuation to finalize some additional data points for the board's consideration. They expect to be prepared to present on September 9th.
an entertain a motion for continuation on asphalt engineering to September 9th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor to continue asphalt engineering to September 9th has been approved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor of the continuance, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Jim, we now have right now in front of us 30 Locust Street, Bungay Brook Townhomes. The applicants like to come forward, please.
So in your package this evening, you have two items here. You have BSC Group's peer review response, or peer review, and LBC's response to that peer review. And the applicant obviously is here this evening. I remind the board at the last meeting, we had a good discussion on traffic, and tonight the idea was the topic of stormwater. I believe the applicant's prepared to speak to that this evening.
Thank you, Jim. Chair and members of the board, just to give you an update of where we are. So we had our follow-up conservation hearing last night. I know, as Jim mentioned, BSC did a peer review, joint peer review for planning board and conservation. So we did discuss some of those topics last night with conservation regarding stormwater and the related environmental issues that they were concerned with. I don't know how you want to go through this meeting, if you want to kind of go through their letter and.
You can give us an overview, Jim?
Yeah, so I think just a high level overview of maybe the plan again, just to give everyone a refresher. And then, just to kind of the general overview of your response, Jim, perhaps. And then I know there's a couple waiver requests in there, so we might want to bring those forward to the board this evening.
Sure. Can you see my screen or no?
Not yet, no. Did you hit the?
Share.
Go back to. There you go. There we go. You'd like to turn your chair, you're welcome to.
So the first few comments were basically stormwater related, and BSC was looking for more information on the stormwater system, which we have agreed to supply and provide more details on the plans, things like that. So there wasn't anything really of any major concern in the first several comments, all the way up to comment number 6. I believe was the first one that probably we should talk about, more of a planning board issue. So one of the comments was there does not appear to be fencing around the infiltration basins and no direct access provided for maintenance of these basins is shown. So I know we talked a little bit last time about how these basins will function. So they're basically landforms, very shallow landforms. Based on the soils of the site, it's very sandy. We don't anticipate the basins to hold water for any significant time. Adding these basically aren't your typical bowls that you see, detention basins they're deep. They're only a couple of feet deep. They're gentle slopes on the side slopes. They're kind of dispersed throughout the site. I think adding fences around these basins will completely change the feel of the site. So this is one of the items that we will be requesting a waiver for. I know Mike Scott is on the phone. He's the PE on the project. If you have specific questions as to how long the basins will hold water, he can certainly address that.
I suspect that will be asked.
Excuse me?
That will be asked.
Yes. So, Mike, I don't know if you're on or can hear. If he's muted or unmuted.
Definitely on. I asked him to unmute.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, I am on, and I can see everything that's going on. I have terrible lighting here. That's why I turned off my video.
So Mike, the question, well, I don't know if you want to.
Well, how long the basins will hold water?
But that will be asked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that is in the stormwater report, which of course we're going to be revising based on BSC's comments and directing us to the local stormwater regs with respect to the need for the 25-year storm with the frozen ground condition, as well as the use of the Cornell rainfall. So we'll be reassessing all the drainage and we'll have a whole new report. But right now, basically what we're looking at is the simple answer is this is pretty much pure sand. That was borne out by the 20 to 25 foot probes we did. I know Phil was on the call, but the entire area is sand. We ran the model with the maximum infiltration rate allowed by DEP, which is 8.27 inches in an hour. That's probably a third to a quarter of the real rate out here. I'd be shocked if you could get water to stay in this sand. Only limiting conditions we saw where we saw what we reported as modeling was actually all perched. We went through about 8 to 10 feet of dry sand. We hit a thin veneer of denser, wetter soil. And then below that, we often hit another 10, 15 feet of dry sand. So we're talking rates of infiltration well beyond the 8 inches. And again, I would say conservatively, the rate we're using is a third to a quarter reality, if not even, a tenth as slow as reality. In other words, ponds will draw down so much faster than the calculations are allowed to report. But again, we will revise all the calculations. We'll make sure that we have a means of an infiltration trench or something in the middle to provide contact at all time, should the ground around the area become frozen. But I'd be shocked if this area holds any water. And if Phil is on, he could maybe speak to the owner. He could speak to the large sand trap that's in front of I'm going to say it's the 6th or 7th green, somewhere on the southeast corner of the property. That's a massive bowl today, and I suspect that's natural material there, where that depth of that basin is about 3 feet above the adjoining wetland. It's bone dry, and I suspect it is all the time, but again, we'll be sure to revise the calculations in accordance with that local stormwater bylaw, which we were not aware of at the time, but we now are.
I'm assuming my golf balls have been in there for years and long gone. They could be, in that 8 inches, believe me. Phil, are they currently, obviously they're not fenced.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's correct. And the pond that's out there today, the irrigation pond isn't fenced either.
Okay.
Nothing's fenced, really.
All right, and it's been that way for how long?
I think the golf course is about 20 years old or
Okay.
so.
Just to, increase our comfort level with that.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, sir.
If I could just say that the pond only holds water because it's lined.
Right.
Otherwise, the pond wouldn't hold water either.
Okay,
And these basins, they completely surround the site, so it's gonna be mostly open field. It's gonna be open field. It's open field now. We've got tree line perimeter all the way around it. We'll do a lot of planting as part of this project, but we're gonna have, the development's gonna be in the middle. It's gonna be surrounded by these basins that are gonna be very shallow. They're gonna look like large fields. So if we have to fence in these fields all the way around this project, it's not gonna look attractive at all. It's an aesthetic thing. It's very important to
all
us.
right.
One other thing to add to that too, so as Steve mentioned, these are along the perimeter, along the backs of the units. So immediately around the units, we'll have, turf grass seed mix. So beyond that, like probably 30 feet or so beyond the units, we're specifying a conservation wildlife mix, which will be like a meadow. It'll only be mowed probably once a year. So, I don't anticipate people walking out to these basins, and even if they did, like Mike mentioned, they're not going to hold water. They're very shallow. And fencing them in will completely change the feel of the site. So that's our reasoning for requesting the waiver. And then there was another comment as part of that same comment was access to the basins. So they're basically open lawn areas. They're going to be accessible from in between the units or from the emergency vehicle access or from some of the walking trails. So we can designate on a plan and showing that there will be access, but they're going to be accessible from multiple locations.
Okay.
Because it's a condominium, everything is open. So we don't have any property lines within the development, so there's no need of us adding easements or anything within the plan.
How close to the neighborhoods and the neighbors are these detention basins? Like, I can see the houses along the side there, but how close to those property lines are they?
This one's probably the closest one. I don't know if you can see the cursor, but
I can't.
off to the west. I think that dash line right there, I'm not going to zoom because I know this computer is slow, but that's the 100-foot perimeter buffer. So it's probably 125 feet or so, probably maybe 150 to the bottom of the basin.
How close to the next houses?
To the houses, plus to the property line. So
Yeah, just estimate, can you estimate to the house?
to the house,
Yeah.
to the existing house, it looks like it's probably another 30 feet, 40 feet from the property line to the house. So, you're approaching 200 feet or so. And there's a fence along that property line as well. So
Your fence or their fence?
it's on the
Existing.
property line. Yeah, it's an existing fence on the property line.
Your fence,
I believe it's on, yeah. It's on that property.
intention to keep it?
That's the intention, yeah. And we have, it's not shown on this plan, this is the grading plan. But we also have vegetation that we're proposing along that property line as well.
Okay, just worried about a kid coming in.
Understood.
Any other concerns with waivers, sir?
Well, that was the one regarding the fence. The next comment that BSC brought up was, let me go back to the comment letter. So this is comment number 7. It's referencing the bike path versus the curbed sidewalks. And we spoke about this at the last hearing. It's come up a couple of times, so, you know, our thought all along has been that, you know, we'd like to have a bike path, a combined bike path, walking path in lieu of sidewalks, only because we know that that's gonna get plowed in the wintertime, where typically sidewalks don't get plowed. So that's our thought on that. Because that would be another waiver request. I'm not sure that's actually regulation, but for the townhomes.
It's also a much more uniform surface to drive on. You don't have to worry about trees, or fire hydrants, or lampposts, or driveways, or curbing. It's uniform with the road. And like Jim said, it would be plowed also. So it's a very practical way of doing it. And I know we hear this all the time from public safety people that they want the sidewalk because of the curb. I believe that 4 to 6 inch curb doesn't do anything. I don't think it does anything. It keeps the water in the road. It doesn't keep cars in the road. Cars drive right up over any curb, anywhere, pretty much any car except for maybe a sports car, but any SUV, any pickup trucks. That curb does not protect anyone. This is a small development where I anticipate the traffic to be going under 20 miles an hour in this development. Because everyone knows each other. When you go over 21 miles, over 20 miles an hour, we're gonna say, slow down, you're going 30, you know, I saw you going, you know, people call it out and people drive slow in their neighborhoods. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. But we understand that, you know, sidewalks have been a thing that every development, planning boards have been requiring them since far back as we can remember. And I just think that bike path is a much more practical way of going about it. I know it's the way it's always been done, but I think you should give strong consideration to that.
You gonna have speed bumps when you come into you?
No,
No.
I don't believe those are necessary. Again, these developments are pretty much self-policed. You know, everyone knows
Right.
everyone within this. This is a tight community, almost like a little neighborhood in itself. Everyone knows each other, and if someone misbehaves, they're called out right away. This is just how it's done.
Can I turn to Jeff for a moment, sir?
Yes, sir.
Traffic and the water and the sewer are some big concerns. I appreciate your comments on the sidewalk. I also certainly appreciate the comments from the safety officer. And Jim, I think we can discuss that with the safety officer.
Yeah, I think I have had some initial discussions, and you know, one of the recommendations that he and I were discussing was, you know, as Mr. Benacasa was mentioning, you know, interiorly maybe you know, they're self-policing each other, but you know, we're introducing a large group into the neighborhood now, and perhaps we talk about, you know, an allowance for no sidewalks within, but perhaps the applicant is willing to work with the town on some potential sidewalks leaving the site, perhaps, so a destination. And whether it's, you know, physical contribution of sidewalks as mitigation, or, you know, cost in lieu of, where the town can do something, I think could be considered here.
We'd be open to that.
You had mentioned it's a neighborhood. Rough ballpark with the number of units you have right now. How many cars do you anticipate?
200.
That's a pretty big neighborhood to
Yes.
self-police. Okay?
Certainly.
I live in a neighborhood with, you know, 18 homes, and we do a good job, and, you know, and you're multiplying that significantly. And I know you mentioned no speed bumps in 20 mile per hour speed limit. Jim, do we have any, and does the safety officer have any discretion in posting speed limit in that area?
Not within a private development, no. But I mean, sure, we could work with the applicant.
I think they may want to work to, you know, slow, it's gonna be a large neighborhood.
We can self-police that, and if we determine that 15 miles an hour is the number, we can put that in our condominium docs, and that can be enforced.
And that would probably, need signage as well.
Yeah, we would put signage up, and we would put in our condominium docs. I mean, you have to inform people.
I understand,
Sure, we would put a speed limit sign up.
Can I ask you a question?
certainly.
Is the association, as they go in, are they gonna have an option to change things if they feel things should be changed in it, if they're not liking something? Or are they gonna have a set of rules before they even set up the association?
They're gonna have a set of rules, but in order to change, to make major changes, I'm trying to think if the number is 3/4 or.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but they're gonna have that option.
It's a high number. It's
Right.
not something that's easily achieved.
Right.
Do 75% typically.
Yeah. It's significant to make changes like that. I don't see them making changes like that, honestly. I mean, they will be more concerned about the safety of their own neighborhood than us at that point. It's their neighborhood.
Yeah,
They
right.
will be. It's their children, it's their families. So,
So I think that's something we can, work through, and Jim can coordinate it with the police department. But I know you've heard already from the neighbors about the traffic in the area, the rate of speed in the area in adjoining streets. And we certainly want to reduce it as best we can. We also want to reduce the speed as best we can within your own environment. What else,
So
sir?
I'm just stay on that point, just quickly, so the way that the roads are laid out, you have a divided landscape median at the entrance. We tried to incorporate some traffic calming measures. I mean, the roads are just straight shots. You can see they're curvilinear,
Mhm.
which typically slows traffic down. So we did that, we did take that into consideration in the design process as well. So that's just something else that would also slow down traffic through the neighborhood. Just going back through the comments for planning board related, the BSC requested that the walking trails that we have throughout the development be reduced to less than 8% if we can to meet ADA requirements, which we certainly do. We'll go back and look at that and make that revision as well. 11. These are all planning board comments. Proposed emergency access road terminates at the dead end where it connects to the proposed interior driveway. There's also no separate material called out for the emergency access, assuming that it would be asphalt, which is the case. That's what we're proposing at this point is bituminous concrete. But we will work with the first responders and safety officers if they would like a different material out there. But right now we're proposing it to be bituminous concrete, so it can be maintained in the winter and plowed.
And again, just reach out to the neighbors on that street. I think they've been very reasonable so far.
Yes, they have.
But I think we also have to be crystal clear. It's not a second means of egress, it's purely for emergency purposes. And I think that has to be marked there and at the end of the street.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of traffic coming down that street.
we would put a gate there.
I understand that.
And number two, and we would change the surface if that was your wish to change the surface. We just think that the asphalt is going to be, it's just more conducive to plowing.
That's fine.
We don't have a problem with.
So just, reach out to,
Well,
and they've not raised that concern yet.
okay.
I know they want to, you're gonna make it meandering. So they don't go through the hump, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah. I just want to say something about the walking trails that we have around it. That we're planning on leaving that open to the neighborhood to be able to access those trails. We think that's a big asset to the community that we're building, and it'll be a big asset to the neighborhood that surrounds us, to be able to come in, walk around those paths around the outside of that development. And that's going to be open to the public. We don't plan on making that exclusive for this
Okay.
development. I think that's a big, important point to know.
Okay,
And at the last meeting, there was discussion that your attorney may draft up some language for a deed restriction of that emergency access to be in perpetuity. If you could.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And that would be vetted through our corporate counsel.
Correct.
They also,
That is a huge significant concern of the neighbors.
don't want to get bogged down in too many details here. I think most of the other comments were pretty straightforward, stormwater related or conservation related, so don't think there was anything else major concern on that, so like Jim said, and I believe you have a copy of our response letter. Most of it was basically we'll agree to revise the plans and address these comments, so that's our next step is to revise the plans. Obviously, we want to try to come to some resolution on the sidewalks and things like that. So
I usually,
we'll work through the appropriate channels for that.
Frank, is there anything else you want to add?
First, let me unmute myself. So a couple of things. Again, I think I would agree with the applicant's presentation that one of our responsibilities as a peer reviewer is to, did I just freeze? Sorry about that. I think I'm sharing.
I'm sharing.
Oh, sorry. There you go. That work?
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I look a little bit better this way than with my mouth open frozen. So one of the things I think really need to take a look at when we do a peer review is what are the municipalities, what are the town of Bellingham's regulations, and are they being met? There are a number of these regulations, I think it's in the board's purview to waive. So for example, in the regulations for detention basins, which is conservation as well, they require 3 test pits in each one. If the soil is that uniform, I would certainly recommend you don't need to spend all that extra money to put the do those test pits. But it's something in a regulation, something I think that someone may want to waive. And again, the data sort of supports that waiving that regulation. So that's one thing. That's what a bunch of our comments were. The applicant is indicating they're going to go back and address. With regard to the detention basins, the one item I think, and they said they're going to do this, that I would have a small concern about would be those basins frozen ground in the winter. It may very well be that 2 or 3 feet of water could pond in those, and therefore it's critical, I think, to take a look at that 25-year storm. You know, how deep does it get? Can it be held in the basin and stuff like that? Certainly, I'm an engineer. I'm not an aesthetics person. And again, I will leave the aesthetics to the landscape architects and to Jim and the board to figure out on some whether a fence is needed or not. I think at the end of the day, where I'm looking for is that we're providing information. We'll review the new stuff that's going to be coming in some point in the near future, and we'll get back from the technical stuff and how it meets the town requirements and how it essentially meets regulatory requirements and or good engineering practice. That's really the background.
Okay. Any other areas where you may want to not have fencing? Were there any other areas, Jim?
So really just the basins, right? And this one actually might be one where I don't know if the board wants to consider a site walk to take a look at those locations. I don't know, as an active golf course, if you're able to stake those basin locations out, I think it wouldn't be very useful if not, right?
We could probably come up with, we'll have to work with Phil, maybe something that we can, just put a couple of spray paint marks on the ground or something.
Maybe a cone.
Yeah,
We could-
yeah, something like that.
Perhaps you guys coordinate that and get back to me, and then I can coordinate with the board if they want to.
Before we go any further, to be transparent, and since this is the first night his name's been mentioned, I've been in town a long time. I'm a member of the Bellingham Lions. I have known the Gurus since I moved here. I just want to be very transparent and let people know that, they're friends. But, like any small town, they're friends with a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I just wanted, to be clear on that. I have a couple any questions about what we've discussed so far from the board?
I'd like to make a couple comments. My name is Walter Callahan. Reservoir Drive.
Yes, sir.
From what I've observed from the discussion about the stormwater basins, first off, where is that water? Is the water being directed by piping or culverts of some sort, or is it just being naturally collected on the locations? And if so, if there's pipes or culvert being used, how big are they? And would that pose a safety issue, say, to children that might be playing in that area?
This is Mike Scott. I can answer that, or probably Frank could answer, but yeah, it's a combination. The design incorporates some areas, certainly the rears of the buildings, and one of the cul-de-sacs, we are directing the water overland. In other cases, the driveways, and I think the rest of the cul-de-sacs, the parking area near the clubhouse that's there today, that will all be captured, and catch basins will be adding stormwater treatment units or forebays to address the higher level of TSS removal, given this is an area that's in the watershed or the wellhead. This is zone. So there are some pipes in there in the range of 12 to 18 inches that would daylight at the edges of those. It's not every one, but it's a couple of them. And one option would be we're showing flared end sections. They can certainly have a, like a critter gate or a safety grate. Yeah, there's 1, 2, there's, as you come around, this is Jim, there's one to the right by the pond. Yeah, there's 4. So I think there's 4 total outlets. And there's another one that dumps into the pond, which is fed today by a pipe and an overflow over by the clubhouse. But the short answer is they could be protected, but there is an open pipe that would lead back into a drainage system. They're not 24, 36, 48-inch pipes. They're 12 and 18, I believe, and I'm going off memory here. But
I'm speaking as one member here. I'd like to see those covered. I think that's it. It's a small amount. I think that's a realistic request.
And
sure.
And to clarify for the public too, so that's, the applicant's here is engineer, and Mr. Scott, who's online, is the applicant's engineer, and Frank DePietro was actually procured by the planning board to vet all these drainage, all the stormwater reports, drainage analysis, and all the safety issues, the water infiltration rates, et cetera. That's Frank and BSC's job to report back to the board to give them an informed decision.
And so before I open up to the public, I just want to make sure the board members don't have any additional questions.
I do have more on the.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
I'll get to those, but the process is we discuss.
I understand. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that you didn't know, and that's fine, sir. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple comments, questions, whatnot. I think the first thing is for your detention basins, I noticed on the soil logs that, and I think Michael brought it up, that there was perch water table. I think it was like 90 inches down, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm not a soil scientist by any means, but with the perch water table, I mean, it usually implies that there's some type of restrictive layer. It might just be some layer of organics or something. And I know you have great sandy soils, which is fantastic for infiltration. Do you have any thoughts on if there is some type of restrictive layer in there to remove that, or because I know because some areas it looks like you're actually cutting, in other areas you're not cutting down to that material. So maybe in those areas that could be where you can do maybe some soil testing, maybe not 3 soil tests per basin, but just in the areas where you're going to hit that potentially restricted layer. And Frank, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Sure, if you would. I would agree with you. So again, there are a number of test pits already across the site. My recollection of the report was there 1 or 2 areas where they basically found a sort of a silt layer 8 or 10 feet down or 12 feet down below the surface. And that obviously would be a barrier to getting water going straight down 25 feet into whatever the groundwater level is. So I think I'd agree that certainly at least one test pit in every one of the detention areas. If in fact you go down 10 or 12 feet and you find a layer like that, then I would suggest you try to sort of limit. Is that a 20 square foot area? Is it a 1,000 square foot area? And if you found that in a detention area, then you might want to come up with a response on how you get through that. Maybe you punch holes in it and put in good material, or you might even put in some kind of a perforated pipe that goes down below the impermeable layer there or something like that. I think there's ways around it. And I would suggest that's probably on a case by case basis. And maybe the basin moves 20 feet and you're out of that layer.
Sure. This is Mike Scott. Those are all great ideas. We've actually done something similar to that on a septic system where we, similar situation, high perched water table, 20, 30 feet of good sand. This was in the town of Acton, or Littleton rather. And the whole system was essentially excavated, and then through maybe 10 to 15 feet down, that confining layer was removed so that you had contact to the lower strata. That was, again, the finer, cleaner sand. And what we saw was, a thin veneer of damp soil. So water's getting through, it's just going obviously at a much slower rate. And there's nothing coming up from below. So we're not looking at periods where there's a big mound out there or anything. And so all those ideas are certainly, doable. One thing is there's a lot of earth moving going on out here in general. It would be easy enough to essentially investigate the size of all the bottoms of the basins and just stipulate that, any confining layer is removed with the better material that's being pushed around, brought into place. And Jim and I actually did the Colonial Ford down in Plymouth. And if anyone's been there, that's a massive fill situation in the rear stormwater basin where about 10 acres of pavement runs into one infiltration system. And they effectively pushed the good sand around to fill in an old depression, and that thing never holds water. And I would make that the case that this site is essentially what we had out there, which frankly is the only other site I've seen anything like this in Massachusetts. I don't generally work in the southeastern part of the state, but this site is very similar to that site. And I think, puncturing a few holes or simply stripping that foot out or half a foot, whatever it is, within the footprints of the basins, that ought to work fine.
Fair enough. Another thing regarding the stormwater basins that I was just interested in, it looks like you have for your primary outlet structure, it's just a vegetated berm. Is that correct?
That's correct. The intention is these are, true infiltration systems that if for some reason the ground were flooded or saturated or frozen, or who knows what condition, the animals are lining up 2 by 2 again, that, the water would overflow a berm and would not flood the buildings or the road and would make its way to the perimeter of the site. That's the intention. And we'll make that clear on the plan. And the velocities would be low. I mean, I'm sort of against specifying, a turf reinforcement mat or something along those lines, but that could certainly be done where the berm, where we might actually expect water to flow, or maybe, you'd have a velocity that could damage the surface. But again, I would rather leave it a natural condition, or I'm going to say natural, a non-rock reinforced condition. So,
Right. I guess the only issue with that potentially is, if it does scour now your stormwater calculations are off because the elevation might change, might not be significant, but and I know you have sandy soils, which means that there is a very low chance of these basins even discharging. However, it might be better. If you just want to if you're going to do just a vegetated outlet, it might be better to also do for your primary outlet some type of conventional outlet structure, whether it be like a concrete box or something. So then that way you won't have any elevation variation. Since that's typical practice. That would just be my comment regarding.
Sure, we could investigate connecting sort of under the higher sides with some sort of pipe conduit or something that would serve as a sort of an overflow at first overflow. Well, we don't, what I would prefer not to do obviously is lower berms where I think we've set them at a point where they can hold water, but we'll look at all that. I totally understand what you're asking. Some sort of sharp edge level spreader that ensures it won't scour out is a common practice, and we can look at that.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I guess my last comment, it's actually going back to the sidewalks versus bike lanes, just circling back to that. My thought on that, if one of these units is hosting something, like a party, or you have guests, you run out of parking, I have a feeling that the bike lane is going to be acting more as parking, on-street parking spaces, which if you don't have sidewalks and you have just the bike lane, now you have no pedestrian refuge whatsoever. So that might be an issue. That's why I think just the conventional sidewalk with curb of some sort is something that I would prefer to see, but that's just me.
That's why I was mentioning what you guys have there. Because I know usually most associations, they have a designated parking area. You're allowed one, two maybe in your driveway,
Right.
and then one maybe in that designated parking lot,
Right, yeah,
and that's it.
we do have 27, visitor spaces at the clubhouse, so, I mean, that's something that may be incorporated into the docks, that, no parking in the street, you have to park in the visitor lot, essentially, at the clubhouse.
It's a good point. It's a possibility that could happen. But we've also seen where people pulled up on the sidewalks and parked when you get overflow people too. And that's an internal policing policy that we would have to enforce internally.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a better chance that people are going to park in that bike lane than mount the curb and park over the sidewalk, which.
We would stripe it and we would let it be known that there's no parking in that spot. They have this little insignias that you spray on, and if you've seen them, they spray actually insignia of a bicycle with some arrows.
Yeah,
So it's known that's a bike lane.
okay.
That's in the cities, it's in Boston, it's everywhere. It's a policing matter. You're correct, though. It couldn't happen.
Okay, I just want, that's my opinion,
You're not wrong.
and I respect yours, so
Okay.
I think that's it for me.
No question. Nothing at this time.
I have no questions.
Before we open to the public, couple things. Where do we stand right now with the sewers? We've been at the 1-inch yard line for a long time.
You're right. So I don't know if I told you, but I was back and forth with the lawyers until I finally made a personal visit down to the diocese in Providence, and I connected there with a fellow Italian. And so he assures me it's going to get done, and we just had back and forth a couple of times with the attorneys. But before I finalized that, I wanted to make sure that the town had, and I sent it over to Jim and to council and through sewer department. Took a little bit extra time, but I think it was important to make sure that they were okay with the language. So we accomplished all that. We got the final version down, we sent it down just yesterday, and I'm told that they're gonna act quickly on it. So I would hope that I have it for the next meeting. That's my anticipation.
With that in mind, and I had alluded to this earlier, you're gonna have a pump station somewhere? Can you be prepared to address concerns the public may have with the pump station with regard to odor? And how you plan to eradicate that if there is odor? And how you plan to make it blend into the environment? And the location of that, and how close it would be to current residents? And then going off track for a moment, I alluded to it earlier. Traffic is a big concern. You heard it, the majority of our very first meeting. What's the number of units that would bring it down to make it traffic neutral? Can we determine that?
Well, we can't, I mean, I'm sure, I'm not a traffic engineer, so not probably the best person to answer that, but I know we did speak when the traffic engineer did the presentation. I think there was an increase between 18 and 20 trips over existing during the peak hour. I did speak with her about that. I know Jim mentioned it to me the other day, so I did call her just to get her opinion on that, her comments. So I think she said this in her presentation, that basically equals one trip every 2 to 3 minutes in the morning. So it's a pretty insignificant number. And she did actually, and those numbers are based, the existing numbers are based off of counts. And then what's projected for proposed is based on the ITE manual, the traffic manual. So she presented me with something. I actually have it here. If I can go back and share my screen. Worked. Second. Saying I'm sharing, but. So this is what she sent me. So these are this is basically empirical data based on a few similar developments around the state. This column in the right here is the ITE trip generation rate for this type of development. So as you can see, it's 0.47 trips. So they went out and measured post construction what the actual trips were, and it's about a 50% reduction over what the numbers say it should be and what's actually out there. So I think the ITE manual it's showing that it's conservative. So in reality, I think you're probably going to be at a net increase, net zero increase over existing conditions, just based on some of these numbers. Again, I'm not a traffic engineer. I can't speak to this professionally, but I did have a conversation with her, and this is the information that she provided. So, I mean, I know we were focused on stormwater tonight.
I understand that. So I just want you to start thinking about it, because I know some neighbors may ask what, the neutral number would be.
Right.
And I like to be able to, tell them what the neutral number would be.
Sure.
And move on and, discuss that at some point.
Right. We may be there already. I don't know the
Okay.
answer to that. So we can, we can have her address that. I
Okay.
think that probably makes more sense.
But again, we wouldn't want our peer review to look at it as well.
Sure.
And I don't think it's, unreasonable request.
Right.
To find out what the neutral number would be, and if so, how can we get there? And you'd be prepared to address the pump station at a future meeting?
Yes,
So
sir.
I think that will be addressed. Also, the sewer. You're gonna be cutting down some trees to get access to the property, is that correct?
Well,
Okay.
when it goes to the cemetery,
Yes. And will
Yes.
some trees be removed?
yes, they actually wanted to put an access road through there, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna build the access road for them,
Okay,
and then we're gonna run the sewer under the access road, so they specifically want another access road for the cemetery, which we're gonna provide for them, so
okay,
it's gonna accomplish two things for them.
okay. What I'd like to see from the Archdiocese, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, I know some of the neighbors are gonna be concerned that the trees have been there for a long time. You're gonna lose some vegetation that is, within their walking areas, so to speak. But if the Archdiocese could indicate that they don't need to replace the trees, Jim, what's looking for some direction from you?
Oh, sure. I mean, you're talking about the sewer line where there's gonna be
Yes.
removal of trees. Certainly, with adding an easement and a sewer line through a forested area, there's gonna be tree removal. So, if the applicant has an ability to, replace some of those, especially near residential areas that, we can certainly look at a strategic placement of some trees to lessen that burden.
We're happy to do that. Again, it's gonna be wider than it would be for the sewer because we're providing them with the driveway
I
access.
understand that. I know you're trying to appease them.
Piece, oh,
It's a give and take.
yes, sir.
I understand.
Yes,
But I
sir.
just anticipate some questions being asked.
How would you like us to go about that?
I think you can work that out with Jim
Jim? Okay,
strategically.
okay.
Now what I'd like to do is open it to the public. Sure, you're the public tonight and other people out there.
Well, if someone else wants to go first, that's fine, but my, excuse me, my other comment, observation relative, excuse me, to traffic in the complex itself, and the discussion of sidewalks versus bike paths. I know for a fact that I have to yell and go out there as well as other neighbors to stop the FedEx, the Amazon, and the UPS trucks from speeding down Reservoir Drive. Okay. Now, why should I have to do that? Well, if they're gonna have an HOA that's gonna actually police that, perhaps they can prevent any resident from speeding in the complex. But what about commercial traffic that's coming in and out, particularly the delivery trucks and so forth, that we're all dependent upon nowadays? I think that's an issue that ought to be looked at very
I think
carefully.
that can be addressed within the documents. And you can put a bonding structure, something in there. And I assume, it's a bad word, I don't want to assume, but hypothetically, with one of the vendors being Amazon, I assume they could be coming from fairly local. So that could be addressed through, Amazon if it's repeated. And they could talk to their people as well as policing it with inside as well. But I think that's where it's gonna be critical for the posting speed limit. And we are gonna have some discussions on these, the appropriate speed limit.
Sure.
So I hopefully we can, work through that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's reasonable. I just want to point out that, reality is one thing. Putting a plan in place and then reality are two different things.
I understand, and we're gonna try to anticipate as many concerns that the board has and the neighbors have.
Right.
To put things in place, so we deal with it as best we can.
Yeah, and I'd like to suggest being on Reservoir Drive that somehow there's more signage put up other than dead end to sort of discourage people from thinking they can get down Reservoir Drive into now the complex.
I've been requesting that from the beginning, and I've been told by the neighbors it's already there. But yeah, we will see additional signage. I think that will be part of that will be part of the mitigation program, but I do want to put signage in there. As best we can, not freeway, it's word will get out that maybe there's a secondary, and that's why I want to get away from a secondary.
Yeah, as it is now, we have people coming down all the time. I mean, on a weekend, we'll see, easily half a dozen cars come up and turn around.
Yep.
Realizing that there's no access
Okay.
to the golf course. So.
And also, I would assume over time, I don't know, through GPS, maybe somehow that can be clarified. I don't know what's done right now. But there are people smarter than I am that can, potentially address that. Any other questions, sir?
For now, I'm fine.
Anything else from the public?
I don't see any questions. Oh, I think we have one, Mr. Rhodes.
Yes, one question that was brought up at the last meeting was snow
Sir,
removal.
can you state your name and address, please?
Sure, my name is Brian Rhodes. I'm at 40 Locust Street in Bellingham. I'm the butter to the northeast corner of the clubhouse in the parking lot.
Okay, I remember you from the last one of the meetings.
Yeah, I know one of the things in line 10 from the BSC was talking about adding the vegetation, which the contractors mentioned they were planning on doing that. One of the things that was brought up at the meeting by the board was snow removal. I wasn't sure how the snow removal was going to occur in that area. And if the entryway has curb stops, if it was possible to add a physical curb stop at the edge of the drive or the parking lot. So that way the snow doesn't just get pushed towards the wetlands.
So I can address that.
Can you address
That-
those?
Yeah, that parking lot will be curved, and on the revised plans, we will designate snow removal areas for that parking lot, so.
And also designate snow farm areas,
I'm sorry, sir.
storage areas?
Yes, we
We'll
will,
show those.
yeah, we'll show those on the revised plans.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
so I hope that addresses your question, sir.
Yes, it does. Thank you for the help.
Thank you for participating. I appreciate it. Any other questions? So Jim, what's the next step? I think we have some homework to do.
Yeah, so the applicant has some homework to do with, provide revisions to the plan, hopefully, back and forth with peer review, realistically continuation to September 23. There's probably, or
Okay. That's fine. Do you need a motion to,
yeah. motion to
Continue.
Continue to September 23rd.
do we need to change any deadline dates?
We'll check, and if so, we'll work with the applicant.
I need a motion to continue this discussion to the 23rd of September.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor is made and seconded. Can continue 30 Locust Street, Bungay Townhomes to our second meeting in September, which is September 23rd. Any additional questions? I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. We'll see you on September 23rd.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much for coming. I hope we've addressed your concerns. Jim, what is next?
So we have a few general business items. First off, the certificate of approval of the preliminary subdivision for Prospect Hill that was reviewed about a month ago, and we reviewed the decision at the last meeting. It didn't have the signature page at that time, so we do have it now. So if I could have.
Well, that's being passed around. I'd like to ask if anyone has any questions on the minutes for the 24th of June and July 8th.
One thing, with the June
Certainly.
24th minutes. I think for the 455 Hartford Ave, I think it stated something about the applicant has a new engineer, Robert Duff from Gurrier and Howman. I think he wasn't new, it wasn't that the engineer for the entire process. The original.
It was in June 24, 455 Hartford.
Page one.
New engineer Robert Duff. Well, there was, maybe it was the same engineer for the board. I think Amy just was aware that there was another engineer working on it.
Oh, okay, all right.
Any other questions or comments?
Well, I didn't know.
He's an engineer, that's why.
Yeah, exactly.
About my bakery.
Do you have a document being passed around the sign?
Again, if everyone's okay with the minutes of,
I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes. For July 8th and June meeting. Do I need to do a separate motion, Jim?
Pardon?
Separate motion?
no, it can be all.
The motion on the floor to approve our most recent two sets of minutes. Any other questions? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Jim, anything else?
That's it for this evening.
Brian, make a motion to adjourn?
I do.
I don't think we need a second. All in favor of adjournment? Please signify by saying aye.
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 Brian?
Okay.